As everybody knows, we started this event publicly 20 years ago in 2004 just to find out who makes the best TV and what's different about each TV.
So who's the king of TVs?
8.9, winning by a small margin, is Sony's A95L.
It looks like the A95L is the winner overall.
A95L.
A95L, you got it.
It sounds like you're implying that the Sony's a bit closer to the BVM. Is
Yes,
that where we're getting
yes,
at?
it is, yes.
Exactly like it.
Yeah.
And many people are saying, oh, how could they win with a second gen panel? And I want to be clear, we don't know if it's a second gen panel or not, and this is why. I've spoken to Samsung Display about this, and when they move their tooling over into third gen, that's all they sell. When they move over, everything moves over. It is only third gen being sold. If it's received from a production line in 2024, it is third gen. Today's video is brought to you by WhoKeys. Trying to build a PC on a budget but don't know where to buy your Windows software cheaply? WhoKeys to the rescue. Use my coupon code SF20 and immediate discount with a free upgrade to Windows 11. At the bottom of this order where it says code CARD, to the right is the product key you need to activate Windows. So copy this long number, then go to the Windows menu and click on Settings. In the Settings menu at the bottom, select Update and Security. Select Activation, then select Change Product Key, paste what you copied from WhoKeys, click Next, click Activate, and you're done. You can buy Windows 11 Pro or Office 2019 Pro with my discount code SF20. Yes, I've been using WhoKeys for the last several years on my own PC builds, and it just works. Oh, we have a judge.
Hi everybody, my name is Mike Osachu. I am a THX ISF video calibrator over 25 years actually, and I service the post-production industry in Toronto, Montreal, calibrating studios, whether you're a colorist or whether you're a VFX artist or an editor. I calibrate the monitors to the reference BVMs or PVNs and consumer panels as well. So there's a variety of different things that I have. I have a good eye for color. Yes.
So mini LEDs, you saw the OLEDs. What are your thoughts about the TVs generally?
I'm glad that this year they put it into two different categories. One with the LCDs and the other ones with the OLEDs, the various OLEDs. In some of the clips we had content that definitely hit the 4,000 nit category. So, with higher brightness, wider dynamic range, we can consider that as pop. And the Sony LCD, the Bravia 9, is the one that would technically pop the most out of the other models that were there, because they're able to achieve that. It's able to achieve that nit value, or not quite the same as the BVM, but it's closer to. The QD-OLEDs, on the other hand, of course, are the ones that have the greatest contrast. You can notice some of the limiting of the light when the screen goes full field, so that does bring down the pop level. But ultimately, in the end, we're trying to achieve a quality video that matches the artistic intent as possible. And what I want to let you know, or what your viewers and us know, is that there's so much work that goes into filmmaking, from pre-production all the way to post, and by the time it gets to the screen, we want to think of films and TV shows as moving art. It's artwork, so we want to make sure that we reproduce that as possible. And this TV shootout that we had today is one of those perfect examples of saying, how can we preserve the art as much as possible in our homes? So what TV are you going to buy after this?
If you could take one TV,
yes,
it's OLED or mini LED, at whatever size you want, which one would it be?
Okay, after having done a lot of work on the studios and dealing with not just moving films but still frames, and understanding that when we put films in a still and we have a chance to evaluate more deeply the color like we did today, I will say that the 77 QD-OLED by Sony is the one I will be buying this October. So
the A95L.
A95L, you got it.
And
yes.
Number 2 TV. What would your number 2 TV be? Not for yourself, but for your parents.
For my parents.
Parents, friends, people who they want a good TV. They say to you, look, I want a good TV. But you know what that means to them. They're not calibrators. What would you, after seeing this, which one would you choose based on
as the number 2 in performance, you say? So the Samsung QD-OLED is right behind the Sony. It's very, very close. I mean, and of course the non-reflective screen, for the average living room, makes a big difference.
It's been very controversial.
Yes, it has.
Among reviewers and consumers.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that anti-reflective technology?
Okay, so I've already done a few calibrations in people's homes with it.
Okay.
They bought it specifically for the least amount of reflection. So if they're thinking of it that way, they're not thinking about the deepest black levels possible. They're just making sure that the glare from the lighting in the room, because not everybody puts a backlight behind their TV sets. We got to be real about it, right? And there's a lot of rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows that, 10, 12, 15-foot ceilings. Okay, that particular screen helps out quite a bit.
And then, of course, we had the G4. How close was it, and what did it do slightly wrong that you were just like, ah? What is that one thing it didn't do well enough?
Well, how about this? Let's start about what it did right. Okay?
What did it right?
What did
That's
it do
great.
right? Because,
What did it do
because
right?
I like this. I don't like to focus only on the negatives, because I think it's really important that your viewers see here about what is good about a set. Because first of all, it is able to achieve a high nit value, which is great. That MLA display, it brings it up. Okay. What else did it do well? Resolution. So we got to remember that that there's pretty much a square pixel on the OLED, on the WOLED, whereas there's a triangular pixel array,
That's right.
subpixel array.
That structure is slightly different.
Yes.
And you notice that.
Well, yes. If we put up a resolution pattern that uses a checkerboard, okay, the LG OLED can actually show the checkers properly. That's lost on the QD-OLED because of the triangular subpixel array.
point.
All right. So I mean, if you're working up very close on the monitor, if you're doing any kind of graphics work, then I think that the LG would definitely be a bit more of a better choice in that regard. Okay. If again, depending on how close you see, you may see on the triangular subpixel array. Some people notice that it looks a little green on one side on the top. It looks a little purple along the bottom because you got just the way you have green and blue and red on the bottom, right? Okay. So that's one option. So the LG does that part right. Where it can struggle. Okay, it has to do with the color purity, right? So you have quantum dots, and then you've got the blue diodes in the LEDs, in the OLED as well. So what ends up happening is if you take a spectral power distribution of these monitors, you'll see that the QD-OLED has very nice spikes in red, green, and blue. Okay, if anybody who's familiar with those graphs, the LG OLED on the other hand will have that nice blue spike, which is from the blue OLED, and then the red and the green are kind of really matched together with yellow. So what you can't get on it is the wide color gamut. The QD OLEDs have far greater color gamut because of that, whereas it's affected on the WOLED because it just doesn't have that same color purity that a QD OLED has.
I know what we haven't talked about is Mini LED. So we talked about OLED.
Yes.
How close was Mini LED to OLED as far as competitively, because you've chosen OLED so far?
I have, yes.
So what are your thoughts on the latest, the Bravia 9, the QN95D, the QNED?
Yeah, so the Bravia 9 is a very interesting display. It's actually my first time with it today, so
Okay.
I hadn't actually seen it prior to. And there was very select scenes where clearly the Bravia 9 was designed to be the home version of the BVM. It doesn't quite hit the same levels,
Right.
but it's the closest that I've seen out there, right? But in terms of holding color and brightness levels, that out of the 3 LCD panels that were there, it was the better one of the 3. Although all LCD panels, I mean, they are going to have their limitations. They're local dimming displays. Depending on how tight the zones are,
Right.
you're going to see halos, right?
Kenny, you're back. So our good friend Judge Kenny is back for another year of excitement.
I'm back. Excited to see you.
Who is Kenny? What do you do? And why are you a judge?
So I'm a level 3 calibrator, and trained with these guys. I am nowhere in the place where Dwayne and Jason and these guys who do all these monitors are. And then traditionally I've been a video engineer.
Which one is your winner?
First of all, I worked out for this. I went to the eye doctor yesterday. Got
Oh, you still worked out by
yeah, no, I worked out. I got lubrication for the eyes. I stretched.
right.
I ate. I got
You learned
it.
your lesson from
Yeah,
last year.
Last
Dry
year was
eyes,
rough.
No glasses.
Last year was rough, right? So I wanted to get it together so that I could really participate. And just look at the numbers, right? Just look at the actual criteria and focus on the numbers of what things we're doing.
Okay.
And for this year, the Sony stood really well. The things that it does well, it just does really well. Without getting into the absolute details is it's just really beautiful. Matching it to the
Right.
Sony monitor, like that's one thing. You know,
Okay.
like it's got an advantage right there.
Second year in a row for
Yeah,
Sony.
yeah.
And again, the directions were very clear. It has to be the closest match to the reference
To the
monitor.
reference monitor,
And
yeah,
that's why you voted for the Sony. You felt it was the closest.
definitely, yeah.
Hey,
How are you?
Mr. Judge,
Yes.
please introduce yourself. I don't think I've seen you before. And what do you do? Why are you a judge?
Well, my name is Richard Drutman, and I just wandered in off the street.
I knew it. There's got to be one every year.
And I was looking for coffee, and somebody said, "Hey,
We have
do you
space
wa-
for one more judge.
do you watch TV?" I'm like, "I've seen a couple of TV shows." I'm like, "Well, seriously, I was a judge last year.
Okay.
I do a lot of post-production work. I have my own
Beautiful.
very full DaVinci Resolve suite, so very much into monitors and things of that nature.
And at the end of it all, was there one that best matched the reference monitor for you, and
Yes.
why?
Yes. Okay. First of all, I think Sony has an unfair advantage here. It's
Okay, let's hear
not
it.
really unfair, but because of the processing in the 3110
Yeah,
is
3110, uh-huh.
Is I guess similar to the processing in their commercial in their
Good point.
their
TVs.
Cousins.
yeah.
Consumer TVs.
Consumers. So they're going to. I feel like they always have an advantage because they're going to always match. Their X1 chip, their reality creation. Their so a lot of stuff trickles down to their line. So the color science of the Sony is going to match the reference Sony monitor. I feel always better, regardless of the display technology. So there's that.
It sounds like you're implying that the Sony's a bit more closer to the BVM. Is
Yes,
that where we're getting
yes,
at?
it
All
is,
right.
yes.
Exactly like it is.
Yeah, yeah.
How
And
close though? I mean,
it's very close.
it kind of takes me to the second place TV for you. So A95L was, wow, this is good. What was close?
This typically, I have not been a fan of Samsung, but I really think that they have improved their product tremendously. I think that they've really caught up.
Footsteps coming. Dwayne
Jumping
Davis
in?
is here. All right. So this is the man. He's the head calibrator for the shootout.
Hey guys.
Speak to me a little bit about choosing the content where it's almost, you're not really looking to make the TVs look their best. It's really a torture test on some of the scene.
Our goal, and my goal in particular, was to be fair to every single technology and manufacturer. We want to show the strengths and the weaknesses of everyone. So the content was kind of geared towards that.
Super chat, thank you.
Yep.
Tested the B9 versus the A95L, and a lot of people are complaining the brightness pumping
Affects tone mapping.
affects tone mapping on the Bravia. Have you seen it? Have you heard about that?
The brightness pumping. So with different APL scenes with the Bravia 9, based on the local dimming setting, you can get flashing and fluctuating in the light output.
Which local dimming setting is the worst?
They all have
They all have it.
their own problem. If you turn it off, yes, it gets rid of it. But you then at the native panel,
That's no
black
good.
level,
Right,
which
right.
no one's going to
Might
look
as well
at.
get a direct view
Right.
TV.
Right.
Direct lit
So we have made Sony, of course, is aware of this. So they should be working on it and put it in the firmware. How long that is, I don't know.
KG. So KG is asking, Pomo, ask Dwayne his thoughts on what the G4 is doing this year that seems to be similar to Sony's always-on dynamic tone mapping for HDR. So I guess the processing in general that you can't turn
Yes.
off.
What we've observed, and because we have the BVM right here to actually see it, they are doing non-defeatable dynamic tone mapping. That is clear. That's quite obvious, because with certain APL scenes, even with looking at APL scenes, which we can look at the waveform monitor on the 3110 and see where it is, we can clearly see that the LG is brightening up that information, although we have all of the dynamic control stuff and we've already programmed in the tone mapping points. So they are doing something. What that actually is, I can't really say, but it's essentially what Sony has been doing for years in HDR, but It's just different.
Different.
It's very different. Even with the A95L, there were some scenes in HDR where it was too bright compared to the BVM.
Yes, I noticed that.
Yeah.
Which one would you take home for yourself?
For me,
Yes, for you.
I would take home any of the OLEDs.
Okay, so we narrowed down to the OLEDs.
Right, simply because for me, and this is only for me, guys, I will only accept for video a emissive display or a reflective display.
Okay.
Not a transmissive display.
That would be LCD TVs.
LCD TVs are transmissive. Reflective would be projector.
Right.
So those are the only two display technologies I accept, because that's the only two display technologies that has been with us for pretty much almost 100 years,
Okay.
if you really look at it. So yes, LCD does have its strengths. For me, it has its own, use case and applications. But for my TV watching or my, movie experience, I can only do an OLED or I can only do a projector.
Among the OLEDs we have here today, G4, S95D, right?
So it's narrowed down.
No, I said all of them. No, I have all of them. It's
Which
because I
one?
have all of them at home.
Which one would you keep if you were only allowed to keep one? I know. I'm trying to get-
me on the spot here, FOMO. Now, come on.
All the judges have already said their piece, right?
Let's talk about the premise. So, are we speaking of SDR, HDR, Dolby
Let's do
Vision?
HDR.
Okay.
HDR.
Oh gosh, that's a tough one, man. I will tell you this. Okay, the reason why it's a tough one, because out of that, in that category, I would choose either the LG or the Samsung. The reason why I would choose the LG is because I have full access to the 1D LUT, and I can actually, which I've personally done on my 83 G4, I can actually adjust every single grayscale point if I put enough time and effort behind it to make it absolutely perfect.
Right. This is your use case, folks.
Right.
So
Right.
don't.
However, I would also take the Samsung, because on the Samsung, with static tone mapping engaged, and if you calibrate it correctly, it tracks the PQ perfectly, and it comes closest to the BVM 310 and the 3110 in that actual mode. So for me, it's kind of like, that's a tough one for me to do. If I can put those two together,
Yeah.
those are the two things that I like from both manufacturers. But overall, if you're forcing me, you put a gun to my head, I'm gonna have to say the G4 because of the 1D LUT.
What are your thoughts on blind testing? 'Cause
Blind
that's what
testing
I'll do.
doesn't matter. Yeah, blind testing does not matter. I know people think that it does. However, especially on the OLED side this year, there's no way to do blind testing.
And you with a matte screen. Oh,
correct.
that's S95D.
You're going to immediately know that. So the blind testing, I get the concept of it, but people still will figure it out,
Yeah.
easily, because every manufacturer does have their own flavor of processing at this point now.
Right.
But at the same time, this year the screen coatings were different. So also that could be masked up, but yeah, it's just the screen coating was different for that not to happen this year on the OLED side. On the LCD side, I mean, you can, and people probably would not be able to figure it out outside of, I guess, to do a proper blind test, you have to put whoever your judges are for the shootout, and then basically a no-fly zone. And when I say no-fly zone, meaning that they cannot, until the shootout, experience, see, hear, listen to any comments or viewing of the displays that they're going to actually be reviewing. That is the only way to really do a blind test and have the results be blind.
And move the TVs around between scenes
Yeah.
as well, because otherwise.
Correct.
And
That's a lot of
Yeah.
logistics behind that.
So we are joined by Classy. We had two calibrators, Classy and Dwayne. You guys talked to Dwayne yesterday. We have Classy here today. He's here to face the music, and I don't envy you. So the biggest question is, hey, what is this HDR general score, which kind of opens up the whole scoring process, the categories, and I'll let you take it from there. Go ahead, Classy.
Yeah, I mean, it's for the end card, you can't have 19 or 20 different categories, right? So what we did is we combined a lot of attributes into categories. So while there was 6 categories for them to be averaged, there was 19 different attributes. So the HDR general, so that's
Okay,
where
so this is why HDR general. I know a lot of you say, oh, what does that mean, right? What does that mean?
mid-level HDR grade. So nothing too dark, nothing that's going to go beyond 1,000 nits or into the widest part of the color gamut.
So this would be a typical scene in any movie you would see.
It's HDR that would look like SDR essentially.
Perfect. Okay.
And then again, multiple attributes.
Okay.
This is where we put the motion, because motion is a general thing for HDR, obviously. The general color accuracy and general just sharpness and detail. This is its biggest win.
So let's talk. So this could be why it won. 9.3 for the Sony, 8.8 for the LG, and 8.6 for the Samsung S95D. So I'm going to pause there. Here, the G4 beat the Samsung S95D. What are your thoughts about that then? So the G4 actually was closer than the Samsung S95D. Do you feel this fairly reflects kind of like our reviews?
Yeah, so for me, in my opinion, the motion at this point is essentially tied now that Samsung fixed, or if it's not entirely fixed at this point, it's good enough that in none of the content that I was able to see did I see any of the frame skips that was plaguing them before.
Excellent.
So that definitely helped. But then there's also the sharpness and detail. So this is where we know that LG this year is now kind of doing what Sony does with the extra little bit of processing.
Little extra magic,
Yeah.
the XR clear thing.
And then Samsung for years has done a blend of sharpening plus smoothing. And so however the judges see that, that might be why
and these cannot be disabled. This is now their default in the processor, in the image. So when you guys say which has a better image processing, it's more of which do you prefer, because these things cannot be disabled now. Okay.
Yep, and these clips were in motion the whole time, so the way motion and the sharpening or sharpness plays together, it's the balance that was they voted on.
Yeah, so you can't pause, right? I mean, it's in motion, so they're watching these clips over, and it probably took the longest because it kept on repeating.
Well, we did pause on a couple occasions, when asked, but specifically, this was a motion-based category, and sharpness and motion play together. So next was the move down to the dark scenes. So for me, this is the most important category. This is where they all have problems.
Okay, so in HDR dark scenes, the score was the Samsung S95D at 9.2.
The Samsungs for me in HDR do low luminance the best, but they all do need improvement still.
Okay.
There's more improvement to be had in these dark scenes than there is in bright ones.
And given that, Sony was a 9.1. So you got Samsung 9.2, Sony's right there behind at 9.1. The shocker is LG 8.2. That is a full point behind. And given how averages work, that's significant. What are your thoughts on that? Like, what separates WOLED from QD-OLED? Because there appears to be a QD-OLED advantage.
Yeah, so there's multiple factors. The two main ones would be uniformity. While the uniformity on the LGs is better than past years, especially in this particular case, it wasn't as good because the 65s notoriously in the past have not been as good as like the 77s before.
Right.
And especially the 83s also were bad before. Now the 83s are more in line with the 77s. The 65s improved, but still not as good. Also, QD-OLEDs have also kind of fell back in uniformity compared to when they first came out. But then also the other part is that the WRGB OLEDs, the color gamut considerably shrinks as it gets darker and darker.
That's something that a few people have talked about, definitely, okay?
So when people talk about BT 2020 or going beyond P3 color, that's where a lot of people think that means it's a bright color, very poppy, vivid color. It doesn't have to be. Most BT 2020 or color beyond P3 actually is dark, or in dark scenes. And so in those dark scenes, when the LG is restricting its gamut more and more and more, it basically is just devoid of color.
And that cannot be fixed in a software update. Basically, that's a hard limitation.
Yeah, that's a
of
limit of the
WOLED.
panel, yeah.
And so LG really needs to take a look at that. And if it's important to them to win the shootout, they have to find a way to address that. And if not, this will continue.
Yep. So then after that was the HDR bright scenes. So those are the scenes that well exceed 1,000 nits. or high APL scenes. And the Sony got 9.1, the Samsung 8.9, and the LG 8.4
And that was
for the bright scenes in HDR.
okay. So this is great. HDR bright scene. So this is my baby here. This is where I think impact and the whole Bravia 9 thing. So 9.1 for the A95L, which is kind of surprising because isn't bright the thing for the 3rd gen panel? But HDR bright scenes, you have the Samsung S95D at 8.9, and the G4, surprising to me, 8.4. So we know it gets bright.
Yep.
But what are the actual criteria that marked down?
Measurably, the Samsung there is the brightest. But this is where the measurements doesn't account for in the real content because of the tone mapping. So because of the way that they tone map, they're trying to show more detail and not get as bright. Sony leans more towards making it brighter with maybe a hair less detail. And then on the LG, it's customizable. You can do a tone map upload. You can make it where do you want more detail, do you want more brightness. But if you do that once, it then applies to all the content. So in certain scenes, if it's exceptionally bright, then it's going to lose some color, turn white if you make it bright.
And that hit the
So you got to find that
hard.
balance.
Yeah.
While the G4 had that impact, I would say more so with the way that it was done, it did give up some detail to get that impact. So that's a preference thing, and that's where tone mapping is entirely your preference. Do you want to make it darker and have all the detail?
We'll move on to the next one real quick. Streaming. So this is what separated the Sony last year. This year, we thought the Alpha Gen would do well. So streaming, we have the Sony winning at 7.9, Samsung right there at 7.8, which kind of surprised all of us because we didn't expect it to do so well. And what surprised me further, though, is that GeForce streaming was 7.3. So the criterion, all of that, and what you saw, why did LG do, I don't want to say badly, but why was it behind the Sony and the Samsung when we expected to do better?
So last year the streaming was handled far differently.
Okay.
It was the first year we implemented it, and it did not apply to the winner. It was a separate thing that was like, this is how they did in the streaming, but it's not going to be applied in the overall average.
Okay.
This year it was applied to the overall average.
Okay.
And what we did is we picked a variety of scenes that are known to exhibit issues on the displays. It's the hardest of content in streaming. Because if you just put on the general show, it'd just be like the HDR general. They're all going to look the same.
Right.
The idea is what's going to show where the companies need to make improvements.
Okay.
They were judging based on a known, like, this scene is going to show problem X. How does it handle problem X?
Okay. Now, without naming the actual content themselves, can you go over the problem X's that you were looking to uncover,
So like
just generally?
in really dark scenes, you're going to have macro blocking. There's less information in
that's
those
a big
dark
one.
scenes. How does it handle it? Does it cause flickering? Does it smooth it out and then now you've lost detail? And the reference monitor is on, so you still get a guide, but depending on what the processing and the TV is doing, it still comes down to preference at that point.
Right.
But it is which one is the least offensive.
Okay. And what was your source on this one? Is it still Apple TV?
Yes.
Okay. And plugged into the internet here, gigabit connection allegedly, but hopefully it isn't because you want to test rough
Yes.
bit rate.
Yeah, the lower the bit rate, the more stress test it would be.
And so basically we're saying LG doesn't treat the low bitrate content as thought as well as the other TVs. I mean, that would be the conclusion with the 7.3?
It would depend, and it would depend per scene. So none of them were able to do very well on all the scenes.
Thus the 7.9
Yes.
and 7.3.
This
None
is
of
where
them
we say you
Yeah.
garbage in, garbage out.
Yep.
And which one is just going to have the least trouble making that garbage even worse.
But overall then, at the end of all of that, the Sony won at an 8.9, then Samsung 8.8, but if you go to the 100th decimal point, it's actually a 0.06 separation.
Yep.
So I would say this is nearly a tie where the Sony edged out the Samsung, is that fair to say?
Yeah.
And then the LG 8.4. So before we move to MiniLED, what are your thoughts in general as far as the placement? Do you agree with
My
it?
thoughts, I would consider all of them image quality-wise a general tie because it depends on what you're watching, what you like to watch, and which one has the strengths or weaknesses that's going to affect what you're watching. And also to keep in mind, this is more of a not so much a TV judgment, but a panel judgment. Because the TV also encompasses, do you need more HDMI 2.1 ports? Do you need more gaming features? Do you, like the whatever particular features, design, build, quality, remote, whatever, the whole TV experience. So for most people, they still need to take that into account. I would say once you're in the premium OLED territory, it really doesn't matter image quality-wise which one you buy. You should be happy. And the elephant in the room, obviously.
There's always an elephant.
Yeah, Dolby Vision HDR10 Plus.
Not tested.
Nope. The reference monitor is only going to show HDR10.
Why was last year's A95L even there? It is Sony's best OLED TV, so in my opinion, you roll out the best. For me, if it's truly objective, you bring out the best. Year to year, the TVs are no longer available. It's relevant to choose the TV that you can buy, right? So in this case, you can buy the A95L. So I think that's why it's relevant. You could actually buy the winner. Our results are in. We now have the winner of the out of the box. The top three were all OLED TVs. Any guesses as to which OLED came in first, right? So all three, we had 5 TVs total. We had the A95L, the Samsung QN95D, the Bravia 9, the G4, and the S95D. And the top three were OLED TVs. So let's start with number 3. Third place was the Samsung S95D.
Yep.
Leaving the top 2. Now, number 1 is the Sony A95L. Number 2 is the G4, which I thought the G4 would come close, and it did. It was very close, but the A95L edged it. And I was quite surprised that the S95D didn't get it, and maybe this is why the anti-glare screen should not come back next year.
Yeah. It could be that. And I had thought that maybe even the fact that the size difference, that maybe the 83 would have wowed them.
And so let's talk about the return problems that Sony's having this week. Everyone's replacing the Bravia 9 with a A95L, apparently, right? So Mike is taking down his 85-inch Bravia 9 today. He used to love it until now.
Are you serious?
And we are going to start a tech therapy for former Bravia 9
Oh
owners
my
and
God,
former
wow.
LG G4 owners.
Wow. And the G4 ones would be like, my TV lost. Brian, give
How we
group
approach
therapy
that.
like an AA meeting.
Wait, no, this is, he nailed it.
Hi, I'm Brian. Hey, Brian.
And I have a problem.
And
I have a
problem. I
G4.
got a G4. I love this since it was born, and now I can't look at it the same
And
way.
I was on the shootout, and I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed.
What do you mean my girl was the